Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be with you in New Delhi today, and first of all I would like to compliment the Energy and Environment Foundation for organizing such a constructive, informative and excellent planned conference. Thank you for inviting me to talk about the oil price dynamics in the so-called New Oil Order. Amid the crude oil price collapse of 2014, the sustained low market prices have been embraced by oil importers such as India as an opportunity to enact much-needed policy reforms. The implications, however, arising from the profound risks owing to the high degree of market uncertainty are far-reaching as they endanger to overshadow the benefits of lower oil prices. The challenge before India to achieve energy security, curb CO2 emissions and improved efficiency in the coming years will be accompanied by its increasing dependence on imported energy and thus the evolution of the oil cycle that lies ahead. Extreme prices, either too high or too low, are not in the best interests of either the producers or the consumers. In the context of the current price cycle, the rebalancing of the oil market remains not only influenced by the prolonged and fragile global economic recovery amid the increasing concerns about carbon emissions and climate change, but most importantly to the ongoing transformations pertaining to key components of the supply side of the oil market, which owing to the emergence of shale oil as the effective marginal barrel. These are the policy shift in OPEC, the OPEC policy shift, the non-alignment between prices and cost structure, and the introduction of a more complex fiscal cycle. Market participants are still trying to discern whether this new set of supply conditions can grow into a stable, long-lived transitionary norm or a short-lived disruptive extreme. The significance is that the impact of the oil price path will be markedly different. In the short run, price scenarios are unfolding in considerably different directions. But uncertainty is even bigger in the long run, where the evolution of the oil price cycle will be determined by the ability of the market to stabilize prices. At this point, I would like to emphasize that the importance of demand shock must not be discounted. It remains to be fully seen whether the weak price responsiveness of demand to the recent down cycle can be attributed to the prolonged recession or to demand destruction caused by fuel substitution and improved efficiency. The significance is that lower demand induced by recession would reverse as global economy recovers, but demand destruction is permanent. That said, the persistent high oil prices over the past decade and the recent oil price collapse are argued to have induced substantial changes on the structural dynamics of the supply side of the market based on four main channels. OPEC has ceded its control over the market and prices. The production profile of shale oil introduces a greater elasticity in a traditionally price-inelastic supply curve. By contrast to conventional producers, the US shale producers are more flexible to adjust their budgeting under a low-price short-cycle investment environment, and the US shale oil has essentially become the new shock absorber for the global oil market. But let us now examine these four main channels in practice and see how they factor into the continuation of the current oil price cycle in accordance with the information signals that emerged in 2015. First, OPEC's role has not fundamentally changed in the international oil market, while its policy shift has paid off well in the short run and is expected to adapt accordingly as the wider uncertainty in relation to the responsiveness of supply and demand to price changes is resolved. The organization has learned since the past that under unfavorable market conditions, slow demand and strong non-OPEC supply, that it is better off in the long run by maintaining its export share of non-OPEC demand and increasing its market share accordingly in order to secure the oil rents accruing to its members. A high pricing strategy can only apply under normal market conditions. And the key point to consider is that OPEC's willingness to stabilize prices has historically applied to temporary rather than the structural shocks, and the nature of the current oil shock is still not clear. Saudi Arabia's behavior has traditionally been asymmetric during price cycles, willing to increase production unilaterally in case of a rapidly increasing oil prices or in the event of supply outage, but less much willing to take the burden of an output reduction alone in a market with falling prices. Today, Saudi Arabia seeks some sort of consensus among a coalition leading to an effective reduction in total supply, including production outside OPEC. Until then, the Saudis chose to allow for price discovery by maximizing their output and let the market enforce marginal cost rule so that the low price is sustained and the excess high cost barrels exit the market. Second, by contrast to conventional production, the manufacturing-like standardized operational processes of US shale have led to significantly shorter lead times from investment decisions to first oil, strong productivity gains, increasing flexibility in the time of field development and extraction, and less barriers to entry and exit for the market. These parameters, along with the sharp declining rates in the production profile of shale wells, conceptually introduces a greater elasticity in a traditionally priced and elastic supply curve. It is economically viable for producers to drop production relatively quick as prices drop and as oil prices recover up to the middle of the aggregate cost curve where the majority of shale oil lies. Shale production can be brought online relatively quick. In practice, however, there is high uncertainty in relation to the timing of the response of shale production to price changes. Not many producers can afford to hold idle operable capacity based on their diverse resource base, financial obligations, and contractual commitments. Shale producers must constantly keep investing to maintain production, which builds up as each new well is drilled. In this respect, the US shale revolution has been built based on external finance, much of it debt, and thus shale output levels will rapidly decline unless equity and debt financing are maintained. In this respect, another binding constraint to the scale of funding is willingness of banks and creditors to continue investing in riskier forms of assets, especially as interest rates rise. Third, when assessing the economic performance of conventional versus unconventional production, conventional production and offshore, to be specific, is considerably influenced by the significantly longer payback periods and much lower rates of return. All the while, shale projects are increasingly becoming very competitive even at a cost basis. Shale producers are indeed more reactive to short-term price changes and more flexible to adjust their budgets accordingly. Alas, lack of access to finance is sought to be one of the most binding long-run constraints for the future US shale capacity growth. Shale investments are granular, highly dependent on external finance, and the capital structure of shale producers is highly leveraged. This entails that access to finance to fund new projects or maintain production in a low-price environment comes at a higher cost and with greater restrictions. And finally, since Saudi Arabia decided to allow price discovery, the predominant view...
Time is almost up.
Sorry?
Time is almost up.
Okay. I'm almost done. The predominant view has been that the US shale producers can effectively assume the role of the global market stabilizer. In practice, the ability of shale oil to buffer shock increases in demand amid a volatile and low-price regime is essentially untested and probably highly constrained, as follows. Rapidity of coordinated response from shale producers is unclear, so as in a tight market, the supply response to price changes needs to be quick, as the market could rapidly fluctuate between surpluses and shortages, leading to sharp shocks in both directions. Coordination among numerous small producers with different production profiles in a deregulated operational environment is problematic. An important lesson out of OPEC's history is that market power becomes more credible and effective if spare capacity can be deployed either by one or relatively few producers. For these reasons, in the long term, shale oil is unlikely to play the role of the swing producer, and even in the short term, the degree at which US shale formations are able to stabilize the market is in effect determined by Saudi Arabia's output response. Ability to adjust a great amount of capacity more quickly and more cheaply than competitors is key to market dominance. So to answer our central question, the recent oil price collapse has signaled a key shift between cycles. From an extended run-up of oil prices which has dominated the oil market over the past decade to a sustained low market price that is substantially below the minimum cost of output expansion and the restriction of competition among oil producers as a response. In conclusion, under present market conditions, an enabling price offering enough inducement to invest and build new capacity based explicitly on the market forces cannot be realized. The existence of large price risk with respect to investment decisions that are long-term in nature implies that the current period of high price uncertainty is most likely to accompany the long-term trend and supercycle in oil prices as oil demand recovers. The shock treatment of low oil prices envisages a level of cohesiveness between OPEC and non-OPEC producers. The lessons of revolutionized efficiency, productivity and performance in the US shale industry to be applied to other sources of production, to establish effective safeguards against the highest exposure of the debt-financed US shale industry to financial shocks, and capital discipline, fiscal political intervention and industry consolidation to ease the squeeze on upstream developments over the next 3 to 5 years as competition for capital will even be more intense. Thank you very much.